Yep. Jim Beard, welcome to Suit Up the Podcast.
Hey, thank you so much for having me here. What
Hey,
a thrill.
it is awesome. I mean, anytime we get someone on the show that in the background I see something that says Doc Savage, that means
Oh,
that
yeah,
we're
that's
communicating
right
with the
over
right
here.
people here.
That's an actual original pulp. I That's the only Doc Savage pulp that I own of, original
Mm.
30s. That one is 30s if I'm not mistaken. Um I have this under the sea theme going on in my living room,
Yes, I
and
was going to
when I
ask
was
about the netting.
yeah, um make a long story short, it was something that my wife wanted to accomplish in our new home. She passed away 4.5 years ago,
Mm.
and so it was one of those things that I fulfilled for her. And her idea
Oh,
was to
nice.
have actual these are actual fishing net, like real fishing nets that I
Uh-huh.
ordered, and they're kind of all around, and there's mermaids and octopuses kind of all around. And then these two cases have all kinds of like pop culture fun stuff, but everything has to have water or
Hmm.
sea or ocean or lake somehow
Hmm.
connected with it. So there's some GI Joes over here that are like the sea adventurer and the sailor guy. And yeah, and then the Doc Savage one is the story called the Feathered Octopus. It's the adventure called The Feathered Octopus.
Wow.
And yeah, and it's just perfect because it has an octopus on the cover of it.
Okay, so this is a slight tangent, but I will definitely say I think that giant octopuses are like the best sea creature monster.
Yeah.
I still they always talk about because I'm a big James Bond fan, as everything about me and our logo and all the stuff should evidence. But the original Doctor No novel, Bond fights a
Damn you.
giant
I was just gonna say
squid.
that. I wanted to say that. Yes. Yeah, it's an amazing thing to end up in the very first James Bond, or pardon me, Dr. No is
It's
second.
the sixth book,
Oh,
which
sick
is
boy.
shocking
His
because
first movie.
yeah, first movie, but obviously didn't make it into the movie and they couldn't. Like what? I imagine the film producers going,
Yeah,
"Yeah, we're not doing the giant
yeah,
octopus thing
yeah.
here."
I'm totally embarrassed, and I have to hand in my James Bond cred now.
That's okay.
Yeah,
With the books, they
it's
all
funny.
run together at a certain point.
A year ago, I did another read through of the whole
Mhm.
Fleming canon, and enjoyed that part all over again. Yeah, and then there's the crabs crawling all over
Yes.
Honey Child. Yeah,
Oh, which so when we had Bob Dice from Men's Adventure
love
magazines,
the man, one of my favorite guys.
Subtropic Bob is awesome. He we were talking about the classic like animals eating people trope because of the weasels rip my
He's the
flesh.
master of all that with all that great stuff that he digs up.
And I love the fact that he knew about that. The moment I was like queuing up, he's like, yes, and then that scene, because they actually filmed it for Dr. No to like have the crabs running up Ursula Andress.
Mhm.
But it looked so ridiculous that they cut it.
Can you imagine what they could do today if if they remade Doctor No?
It's the hard thing for me with that movie is that it's so good because Connery. I just can't imagine anyone other than Connery in it. It would have to be a very faithful, and this was kind of the point I was going to. They keep talking about making like mini series versions of
Mm,
each book where it's more
mhm.
faithful to the book. The problem is Fleming is so inconsistent on each book. If you know this, having read them all recently,
Yeah.
he kind of tweaks. Like as much as we talk about the Bond formula, that's more of a film thing. The
Hmm.
books range from being very grounded to Bond's fighting a squid. Like there's no consistency in tonal from book to book. Uh, I will
That
lose my James Bond card if I don't ask. When you did your read through, which was your favorite?
Wow. It's probably going to have to come down on wow. Now I wasn't prepared for this question. Here's me, Mister. Oh, just throw stuff at me, kind of stuff, and I'll roll with it. I have always enjoyed You Only Live Twice.
Mm,
I
which
love the setting of
mm,
Japan. In that I love Tiger Tanaka. You know what's one of my favorites, and no one ever talks about the book, is Moonraker.
Yes.
Yeah,
Oh, yes.
it's atypical in many, many ways.
Hmm.
They say that people don't like it because it's completely set in England, which is a really stupid reason not
Yeah.
to,
People love
not to like
Skyfall.
something.
Half of it's because
Yeah,
it's entirely set in England.
yeah. And one of the things that I really love is that, spoiler alert, Bond does not get the girl.
I know.
Like almost not at all. He gets to see her nude,
Hmm.
but other
I
than that,
appreciate that Fleming at least threw that in there, of course.
yeah. I mean, thank you, Ian. We appreciate that very, very much. But I love it. She goes off at the end to her fiance, and
Hmm.
that's it. I tell you, one of the things in this read through that I really sat up and took more notice of is the short stories
Yes.
in both View to a Kill and in Octopussy.
Hmm.
And I was saying online about, sometimes I thought that his Bond short stories were better than some of the
Hmm.
novels. That, short stories is a real art form. It
Hmm.
really, really is. And there's just some really great short stories in there. And then by the end, I said, boy, do I wish he wrote more
Hmm.
Bond short stories. There's some really, really ones that I didn't care for before, but like had a greater appreciation for this time through.
The short stories, so Octopussy especially is one that I
Hey, we're right back to Octopus.
yeah, I know, right? Back to octopuses. It's
Yeah.
full circle. It all roads. We're not tangents. We're focused on octopuses,
See,
and
I knew we would get back around to it.
that short story always holds my fascination just so much because of the concepts there. For when I try writing a short story, because cards on the table, I've only written like 3 short stories, and I'd say only one of them was even close to good. Which
Okay,
means
well,
I
I'm
will pick
done.
your brain
I'm
on
turning
short
this
sto
off. I'm
I'm
done. I'm
sorry.
sorry. I can
Uh,
only talk to people who have written at least 5 short stories.
oh, darn it, we just missed the cut. Well, I actually wanna pick your brain on short stories at some point, but the
Okay.
the the structure Octopussy, I think, is like a perfect short story, especially for a Bond story, because it has that you show up in the middle of something else. Bond as a character in there is so small, but impacts everything that happens afterwards.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. It's pretty genius, the way he put together a lot of those short stories, and you can tell that it was like he wanted to do different things. Like
Mhm.
there's some experimentation going on in there, and then sometimes you just have pure Bond. The story of View to a Kill, I mean, it's
Oh,
just
yes.
pure, unadulterated James
Mhm.
Bond. It's really, really wonderful. So, if anybody has kind of skipped over those two collections when you're
Mhm.
doing the Bond novels, don't, because I think there's a lot of rewards from reading those.
So View to a Kill that was actually based on a treatment that he wrote for a TV show that he wanted to get off the ground, which I thought was
Yeah,
also kinda cool.
yeah, yeah. We pretty much have at least some of those short stories, because they were all like his plots.
Mhm.
For that. Can you imagine if they had gone down that road and like Bond did not become a movie thing, but it was more of a TV show thing? I
We
don't know if we'd be
we wouldn't
talking
have
about
it.
it right now.
No, I that's such a unique zeitgeist thing because and I'm actually I'll ask you your thoughts on this because you know a lot about the pulps, a lot about all of these characters and IP that we've had for generations. That at some points, like different characters, as time goes on, they just start dropping off from popular
Yeah.
knowledge.
Yep.
I mean, Bulldog Drummond was a character that was popular before the Saint. Then there was the Saint, and then there was James Bond.
Mhm.
Bulldog Drummond got lots of movies. I think The Saint had this TV show starring Roger Moore, yet none of
Right. And
those
a radio
managed
drama.
and a radio drama. None
Yeah.
of those things managed to last past the 60s,
Mhm.
really, for our collective culture today.
Mhm.
What do you, in your, what I'm going to call expert opinion here, what do you think was that secret sauce that actually kept James Bond persisting compared to the others?
It's got to be the movies. Bond got a boost from President Kennedy saying that he read and enjoyed the novels. I think that's probably why my dad started reading them. My dad is
Hmm.
the big James Bond fan. He started reading them right around the year I was born, if I remember. So he came into it like more in the mid 60s.
Hmm.
I don't really know how until Kennedy mentioned them. I don't know if they were almost like kind of almost forgotten. I mean, they were
Hmm.
popular novels when they came out. And then I think it really was that movie that's somebody took a chance on it, and that fed it. I mean, it's kind of like it's like comic books today. A hundred
Hmm.
thousand people may buy a comic book, but 100 million people go to the movies,
Yeah.
and that's what's kept that stuff alive. To the point where sometimes the owners of those properties, the comic book properties, they only keep the books alive because they know they can pick from it and make movies that make $1 billion.
Hmm. Every time I
But
see a new character in a comic book, I'm like, oh, you're really hoping this one takes off, aren't you?
yeah, yeah. Sometimes when it's really obvious, and then it kind of gets sad. But yeah, you're right, because there were so many other characters that could have become what James Bond is today, but for some reason, um, but but there's a real beauty to Ian
Hmm.
Fleming's prose.
Oh,
I
yes.
I enjoy the quiet moments,
Hmm.
maybe even more than the loud moments in the novels. I enjoy what is uniquely Fleming, which is, the brand consciousness of everything. It's like, tell me what Bond had for breakfast, please. Go on for a page about it. I don't care. I want to read those things. And Bond himself is a really fascinating character, and there's an
Hmm.
arc that
Yep.
goes through those novels, and I don't know if people are really aware of that. It's the story of self-destruction,
Yep.
and it's amazing. It's a little sad because it ends for me, on a somewhat sour note with Man with the
Yeah.
Golden Gun. It's weird.
And that's the hard part because Fleming died before it was finished. So
Yeah,
it had
yeah,
Kingsley
and they
Amis come
say
in
he
and
was
help.
gonna do, more
Yeah.
stuff with it. But even so, it's kind of a tepid plot,
Hmm.
you know?
Yeah.
I mean,
Especially
it's
after
still
you only live
readable.
twice, which
Yeah.
is I honestly, so weirdly enough, I'm not a big fan of the movie. The movie just doesn't do it for me. But the book is
Hmm.
so incredible. And it has that very dramatic, moody sense.
You're talking
Um,
about you only live twice, right?
yes.
I can't
Yes.
fault the movie. The girl in it is from Godzilla movies,
Oh,
so
well, I mean, that's a great reason. It's just for whatever reason, I've never
uh,
connected with the film because of like think
yeah,
the lighter moments and the gadgets, but the book
yeah.
itself just does it for me. Did you read the Anthony Horowitz books that came out with A Mind to Kill at all?
I Okay, I read the first half dozen John Gardner novels, and then I
Okay.
got tired.
Oh,
I got tired
oh,
of them.
yes, because they suck.
Yeah. Well, back then you wanted more James Bond,
Yes.
and he was I have Colonel Sun, and I have
Okay.
never read it.
It's really good.
It's my intention to read it.
Mm.
What I enjoyed was, boy, I can't think of the name of it, but it's so and so writing as Ian Fleming.
Oh, Sebastian Falks,
Oh,
Devil May
yeah.
Care. Yes.
I really enjoyed that one. I enjoy the ones that they set him in
Hmm.
the 60s,
Yes.
50s, 60s,
Hmm.
whatever. I don't really much enjoy the later ones. There was one where like F bombs are being dropped, and
Yeah.
it was like this weird thing where like um Fleming intimated that Bond used the F word, but it never
I
actually used the F word, you
So
know?
that's actually one of my favorite scenes in the book of You Only
Uh,
Live Twice is when
yes.
Bond is and Tiger Tanaka are talking about swear words and he's like, I
Yeah,
can't make it through the day without my four-letter words. And he rattles off a few. Like the way
yeah.
that he describes swearing, for me as a writer, I think is more fascinating than hearing a character swear.
Yeah, I was just talking to my son about this. He and I talk a lot about Japan.
Oh,
He was
cool.
lucky enough to go to Japan, and I sometimes pick
Oh.
his brain. I'm a
Mhm.
big well, big. I'm an immense Ultraman fan
Okay.
and Godzilla, but
Oh,
both those Showa, like
yes.
classic.
So wait, then what do you think of Godzilla minus one?
I've seen it twice now, and I like it,
Hmm.
but I like Shin Godzilla better.
Which is fair.
Yeah, it's funny. Minus one has a little too much human drama for my tastes.
So that's the funny thing, because I grew up watching like the Showa and the Heisei Godzillas. Heisei Godzillas are right my jam, where it's just the right amount of both.
Yeah,
But
I think I've probably only seen two of those, and I have not seen any Millennium or
ooh,
whatever
no,
else.
no, no, no. The
But
Millennium's just
I love Shin Godzilla. I took a chance. Love
uh-huh.
it, love it, love it to death. Shin Ultraman
I
is
was gonna ask Shin Ultraman. I haven't seen it, but I've heard that they made one.
yeah, it's like they took everything that is classic Ultraman, the first series, the 60s, Ultraman, and somehow made it into just a feature film. But it's episodic in a way, but it
Oh,
so
cool.
much emulates the show, but it's obviously set in modern times with modern, things going on. It took my most favorite scene from any episode of Ultraman and reinterpreted it
Oh,
in the universe of the movie. And I was just when it happened, I was like, "Oh my god, I know what they're doing here. This is fantastic." And then there's Shin Kamen Rider, which is okay. It's not bad.
okay.
Okay. Now, damn it all, where the hell was I going with this?
You were talking
Oh,
about
I
your
said about
son with, yes, son with
yeah.
Japan. Yes.
So we were talking about because I talk to him all the time about this amazing thing where you watch Japanese TV shows and movies, and they in the middle of them speaking Japanese, they drop in an English word for like apparently no reason, and
Hmm.
it drives me nuts. We're what he and I are watch. We go to Godzilla minus one, and there's a guy talking, and he's like dot 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 engine dot 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 dot. And I turned to my son and I'm like, why did he use the word engine? Why? Why? And he's like, I really don't know. I said, they have a word for engine, don't they? Like car engine. And he's like, yeah, they should. It's he said he thinks it's just like sometimes they think it's cool to put in
Use it
English
maybe
words.
as slang.
It might
So
be a lot of it was
I was
good.
just gonna say, so weirdly enough, I have an odd Japanese connection where I grew up in Walworth, Wisconsin, which or nearby there, where the only Kikoman plant in the United States is. All of the all of the upper executives at the
Uh-huh.
Kikoman plant, they have like a tour of duty that they serve here in the US at the plant. So my
Okay.
mom, like through her church, had this connection to like uh help the Japanese wives like
Huh.
acclimate here to the States. So I grew up with Japanese people. We'd have dinner at their homes. I definitely prefer authentic Japanese cooking. But I discovered through that there are a lot of American words that
Uh-huh.
just are a part of Japanese culture at this point,
Yeah,
weirdly enough.
more so than Japanese words are a part of our
Yes.
culture. If there is any, it's generally like food
Hmm.
words or maybe names. There's very few that we would just use in casual conversation. Um, Potentially, and we might even just be sort of goofing around if we say
Hmm.
sayonara,
Yeah.
or I'm trying to think of another one, but really there isn't. But theirs is just peppered with it.
Hmm.
A lot of that I think is because of the occupation.
Yes. I mean, that's probably
They
it.
absorbed a lot of stuff,
Yeah.
and then also on their
Also
building,
business stuff too over the
yes,
decades.
buildings will have English words on it, and it was
Hmm.
probably to help out the
Ah,
occupied
yeah.
forces that were there. They use a lot of uh, Western
Hmm.
numerals. I've noticed that too. But gosh, I was just watching. Uh, uh, I got to get this name right. It's Mega Monster Battle Ultra Galaxy, and like the name of their group is in English.
Hmm.
It's this funny little thing. So in the novel You Only Live Twice, they're talking about swearing, and Tiger says we don't have swear words, which isn't probably accurate, but he said except for we have one, and that's where I learned shamata, because that means I have made a mistake. And he teaches that to Bond. And Bond's like, well, it's not the same. It's just not the same for art. But at one point, I think he does then actually use Shamata to say, I have made a mistake. The wonderful thing is that every once in a while, I'll be watching Ultraman here and throughout the, years, and you'll hear somebody will say Shamata. And it's so funny because it's like, it's a swear word, supposedly.
Mhm.
Uh, but yeah, it's supposed to mean I have made a mistake.
Which, to be fair, sounds like the worst thing possible. Uh,
Yeah, yeah,
I have some other stuff I want us to start talking about here, but
yeah.
one last thing on the
I know,
Japan.
I
Uh,
know.
our intro, like,
It's
just
like you
was just
wind me up,
fantastic.
man. I'm just gonna go and go.
And I love it because I do the exact same thing. Did you read Hard Case Crime published a couple years ago, Five Decembers by James Kestrel? Did you get a chance to read that?
No, what's funny is I inherited my dad's paperback book collection
Mhm.
about a year or so ago because he went into assisted living,
Mm.
and he had from the 60s up to the 90s just hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of books. I gave all he had hard like the hard case crime books. He had, like
Uh-huh.
this immense. I gave them all to John Bruning.
Oh, that's
So
nice.
you should ask him if he has that in there. I mean, I don't really know if it's in there or not. I don't read a lot of like
Mhm.
crime. That was my dad.
Mhm.
His whole jam was crime novels. He read some mystery and some thriller and a few other things, but crime novels, like his most favorite author is James Hadley Chase. I
Hmm,
don't
I'm
know.
not familiar with him.
Okay, he was a prolific guy. My dad's greatest accomplishment in his life is that he tracked down every single James Hadley Chase work ever, and
Wow.
and and that he kept all of those when he went into assisted living. He got rid of every. Oh, he kept his Fleming bonds. He won't give
Oh,
those to me yet.
ooh, wait,
And,
because yeah, he might have like originals,
well, his are from the '60s,
which still are
which
more
no, I
vintage
I
than yeah.
I totally get what you're saying. Yeah, but his would be from the 60s. They're as old as I am now.
That's so cool.
Yeah,
Uh, so how did you get exposed to the pulps?
through him. Yeah, almost everything that I like in pop culture somehow came from my dad. And I know John Bruning's the same way, and he and I talk about this a lot, that the people that we are today is because of our fathers. Um, my dad was born in 1936, so
Mhm.
he grew up, in the 40s and 50s, and he was a pulp fan. He was a big radio,
Mhm.
fan. And then, he was right there when the paperback thing started, in the 50s. So um he was it my dad is still with us. I keep saying he
Mhm.
was for some he is a big fan of The Shadow.
Mhm.
So I
Ooh,
got that, I mean, that's so pure pulp right there.
yes.
What's funny is he knew who Doc Savage was, but
Mhm.
I don't know if he ever actually read Doc Savage back in the
Mm.
day. I became a big Doc Savage fan because of Will Murray, the guy that up until
Mhm.
very recently was writing the official new Doc Savage novels. Um, my dad also liked the Phantom from
Mhm.
the comics and comic strips, and Green Hornet
Mhm.
from radio, and the Lone Ranger. Oh my God,
Oh, the
my
Lone
dad is a
Ranger.
big Lone Ranger fan. So I was immersed in all of that as a kid. He would have 8-track tapes of the old radio shows, and he had an 8-track player in his car, and we used to, when we'd go somewhere, we would play
Mhm.
those. So I got a lot of the Lone Ranger radio dramas and Green Hornet in that way. And then he was also or is also a big comic book fan, and I got
Mhm.
all of my love for comic books from him. Especially. Batman.
Hmm.
I move more towards the like mystery men type
Hmm.
of hero, superheroes more than the super powered
Yeah.
superheroes. But again, Shadow,
Hmm.
Batman, Green Hornet, the Phantom. I'm a huge fan of Doctor Midnight from
Ooh,
Justice
yes.
League of America, Wildcat.
Hmm.
All those the original Sandman
Hmm.
and that sort of thing. But yeah, that whole thing with the pulps came from my dad. And then several years ago, after I had a little love affair and crushing defeat by the comics industry when I thought I could, get into that. I just had such an urge to write and I didn't know what to write. And I tried I out to be a pulp writer with Ron Fortier of Airship 27.
Hmm.
I knew of him because he wrote the Green Hornet comics for Now
Oh.
Comics in the 90s.
Hmm.
I found him on Facebook one day and became Facebook friends with him and saw that he was now a publisher of like new pulp novels. And I said, "Oh, that's a really cool idea," and I tried out for him. He made me write a two-page pulp excerpt and he said, "Just pick something," and I picked Doc Savage and I wrote 2 pages and he agreed. He said, "Yep, you can write pulp." And I've never looked back. I
That's so
found
cool.
I found that I could write pulp where I couldn't write the great American novel.
Hmm.
I tried to do that, with, you know, feelings and emotions and angst and all of that stuff. And it was just stupid,
Hmm.
and I I could do that rapid fire machine
Hmm.
gun pulp and end every chapter on a cliffhanger kind of thing and
Which
felt
is an art that,
it it really is. Yeah.
especially when, so I, not to call any particular author out, I recently read a book that was very dull, very boring, and it was supposed to be a spy thriller.
Uh,
Did not do it. One of the main things is it was trying to be very literary,
yeah.
and that just, it did not, where, like we were talking Fleming, ends tight chapters. None of those books are very big. They're all nice, short, brief, to the
Yeah.
point.
Yeah.
This book was
They're
like
essentially pulp
300
novels.
pages.
Right. They're essentially pulp
Yeah.
novels.
So being able to land on the right note to end and get someone to turn to the next page is such a underappreciated art.
Yeah. And that's exactly what the pulps are. They are, they've always been called story driven,
Hmm.
not character driven. And I always say that doesn't mean that the characters aren't interesting. It just
Hmm.
means that they themselves are not necessarily driving the story. The
Hmm.
story is driving the story. Um, those original pulp characters were supposed to be unchanging.
Hmm.
Uh, they had to be like that. They had to be a comfortable thing that
Hmm.
that guys for the most part,
Yeah.
want to pick up month after month and always
Hmm.
know what they were getting. And that's exactly what it is. Now, these days, we're not going to necessarily do that. I mean, there are different sensibilities now,
Hmm.
and I think what we've found out is that we can actually puts character development into these pulp novels, but still write it in a pulp style.
Yes.
I mean, that's what I say that I do. I write adventure fiction in a classic
Hmm.
pulp style, which
Hmm.
means it's terser, sentences that just pop out at
Hmm.
you, and that sort of thing, and make sure that you have a lot of action and that you're driving things along. But that doesn't mean that your character can't change as your novels,
Hmm.
go along.
Which I want to segue a little bit into talking about Sergeant Janus,
Okay.
because I think that that is actually a good example of what you're talking about,
Okay.
where Janus, and I've only read the first one so far. I'm looking forward to
Okay.
reading the others because
Okay.
even in just the first one, you
You're
see a
still
little bit,
talking to me after reading the first one.
you see an arc that
Uh-huh.
his character kind of goes on, despite the fact you took a very interesting approach for writing these stories, where each story is written by the client,
Yeah.
which I love as a plot device because other so the simple way that a lot of people approach this is, oh, this is like Sherlock Holmes, but with ghosts. So we have our Sherlock Holmes and then our Watson character. Watson character writes a story.
Hmm.
That's what most people would do. You did not do that. And I love that you didn't do it because it's so much more interesting
Thank you.
to have the client tell the story because you also play with different voices and perspectives and even writing styles in
Yes.
each one of those
Yeah.
stories.
Yeah. And
Tell me a little bit about that.
that was one of the challenges, is to, because I had to become a different character. They're all in the first person. And it's funny because I don't in general, I don't like reading first person. And I
Hmm.
used to tell my wife that, and then here it is, I wound up making a series that's all in the first person for the most part. Um I I love the occult detective genre, and you
Hmm.
described it perfectly. It's basically Sherlock Holmes with ghosts.
Hmm.
That's where that whole genre came from. It started pretty much in the teens,
Wow.
of the 20th century. And there's a lot of guys that were writing it, and some of them became more popular than others. The one that inspired me was William Hope Hodgson's Carnacki
Hmm.
stories. I discovered Carnacki through League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, the comic.
Mm,
Alan
yes.
Moore introduced me to Carnacki, and I sought out the original stories. There's only 9 short stories with the
Oh.
character. I read them one a night for 9 nights in a row, and just loved it. And I said, okay, that's what I want to try to do. I had just started working with Ron at Airship 27 and doing some stuff, and I pitched the idea of it to him. It was what I did grew out of my need to try to do something different. I wanted
Hmm.
it to be classic occult detective.
Yeah.
Said, okay, but I still have to like make my mark, right? I still have to do something different. And I started going step by step. I said, okay, um, I don't want a Watson.
Hmm.
Too much Sherlock Holmes. Sherlock Holmes already did it, and did it fine. So I said, okay, well, somebody has to tell his adventures. And then I said, okay, I was going to do it like from his files. And it's like,
Hmm.
no, I don't want Janus to
Hmm.
tell the stories either. That next step, that next leap was, okay, well, other people more on the outside in a way tell the stories. That led me to, oh, his clients could, like, what if he did this really audacious thing, which is go to the clients and say, will you please write up what happened for my files? Like, it's almost like I'm too lazy to do it. It's more like he's too busy. Um, this is kind of funny, and I'm not comparing myself to Paul McCartney, but it reminds me of the story of the song Yesterday.
Uh-huh.
Paul McCartney says that he dreamed yesterday, the melody, that whole
Hmm.
thing, whole cloth, woke up in the morning, kept humming it, said, that's not bad. And then he thought, you know what? There's no way that I came up with that. It must have heard it and it stuck in my head.
Hmm.
And he went around to different people and said, do you know this tune? And they all said, no, I don't know that tune, but it's pretty good. I went around to different people in the know
Hmm.
who were pulp experts and said, and gave them that idea. And one after another, they all were like, no, I don't think I've ever heard of anybody doing that. The key was Will Murray. I
Mm.
said it to him because he's just the pulp expert guy, and he's like, no. He said, I can't think of anybody that's ever done anything like that. It's like, yes, 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 yes. Okay, so and then I wrote one
Hmm.
of the first story, and it seemed to work, and I was
Hmm.
pretty happy with it, and then I went from there. um it seems like you sort of mentioned this, it seems like it's a collection of short stories, but to me it's a novel. because there's little links between stories
Yes.
in the beginning, and then those links
Hmm.
grow and grow and grow until at the end you see it is an arc,
Hmm.
of it's almost Janus at towards the end of his career in a
Hmm.
way. I kind of started at the end of things, um, and and it seemed to be pretty well received. It's the word for it is epistolary.
Yes.
Um, uh, my wife's favorite novel was Dracula, the original Bram Stoker
Oh.
Dracula, and
Uh-huh.
she used to just reread it, like once a year. And so that's sort of the template, is that's epistolary. And what I love about it is it's not just one person
Hmm.
writing a journal, it's all different things. It's a couple different voices, and it like letters or journal
Hmm.
entries and
Well,
different
like the
things like that.
policeman's report, I
Yeah,
think was like such a fantastic because we're getting like these people's individual stories, and then all of a sudden it's the police report and it's him
yeah,
trying to you feel him as a sitting down a Bobby sitting down going, how okay, just describe exactly what happened.
hmm,
And he describes exactly what happened.
yeah.
He You can feel him trying not to comment on like his ability to comprehend any
Yeah,
of the stuff
because
he's
he's a
seen.
he's a by the book,
Mhm.
type of guy. It was really interesting because there's eight different chapters, whatever you want to call them, stories or whatever. And there's eight different voices. I tell people it's eight different points of view
Mhm.
on what Sergeant Janus does,
Mhm.
and you're going to get different opinions on
Yep.
what he does. Some people think it's really great and cool and wonderful. Some people are just really mystified by it. At least one person thinks he's a charlatan, and then yeah, you get a policeman who's doing this very kind of cold reading,
Mhm.
of the whole thing. Um, he cracks me up because I'm sort of making fun of people who cannot type a normal sentence without capitalizing words that have no business being capitalized
Okay.
for the
So
heck of it.
I'm so glad that that was intentional because I'm sitting there going, wait a moment. All of a sudden, I'm reading it and I start noticing it. I'm like, wait, is
Yeah.
this like one of those things where the author like hides a code in the thing? And I'm like
I
trying to
wish I was
line up
that
the
clever, man.
words.
No, 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 no. It's literally that. And they tended to do that, in previous centuries, turn
Hmm.
of the century or whatever. Where to me, I've seen that many different times. It's you see somebody's handwritten letter or whatever, and you go, "Why did you capitalize that word right there?" I see that on Facebook every day of my life
Oh,
practically. So yeah, that policeman has a little bit of a weird thing where he capitalizes words in the middle of a sentence for because you think in the beginning that he is emphasizing words, but
hmm.
then as you go along, you realize, no, it's literally just, he just capitalizes the word for no reason. I don't know, is it something he learned as a kid? I don't know. It means something to him, maybe.
You also wrote a murder mystery in there, which
Yeah,
honestly, that's probably my favorite of all of them, all of the chapters, just because you
yeah.
you structured it beautifully because it has this murder of Roger Ackroyd angle to it that just aces.
Thank you. Thank you. That was a really, really fun one. Because I don't think up to that point I'd ever really written a mystery or whatever. And I said to myself, I have to have a twist at the end. I have to have a twist at the end. And it's like I'm hoping people don't figure it out. Am I that clever or I'm not that clever? Um, I think my favorite story is the one with the lady that's home alone. Her
Hmm.
her husband is gone and she's sort of like a castle under siege
Hmm.
by ghosts, because that
It
was the
read
story.
like Darren Aronofsky, to be honest. So like
I don't know that.
so he's the guy that directed that film Mother that came out
Okay,
starring Jennifer Lawrence and Javier Bardem. I haven't seen it. I've seen clips
okay.
and stuff. My point being it feels very artistic and fascinating and deep. So like kudos, good
I will
job.
take your word for it. That's the story that I tried to creep myself out.
Hmm.
They say that the best horror is the one that scares you. Like the best
Hmm.
writing, a horror writing you can do is the writing that scares you.
Hmm.
And I remember sitting, in my area where I wrote, wow, millions of years ago in the apartment that we used to have, and I kind of was dark and I had one light or whatever, and I had to stop at a couple points because I was creeping myself out. Some of that imagery that is in that particular story is something that happened to me as a kid that I
Mm.
don't know to this day if I was imagining it or dreaming it, or I
Hmm.
really did see something in a window one time but that's probably my favorite one. There's a in the next book, Sergeant Janus Returns. Oops, spoiler alert, Sergeant Janus Returns. There's a sequel to that story
Okay.
of a kind.
Hmm. I'm looking forward to it. Genuinely, like I've had a ball with them. We were
Thank
talking
you.
the way that it also it works really well with that pulp genre feel to it, where it is installments of a story
Yeah,
that
yeah,
has this arc. It has the serialized element of it that works really strongly.
yeah,
And for a person like me who likes to sit down and go, I'm going to read X amount of pages is like what I do with a lot of novels. In
yeah.
this case, it's
I do
nice
that
to be
too.
able to I'm reading just whole cloth. This is beginning, middle, end of narrative that is a part of a larger picture.
Yeah. Um, I changed it up for the next novel, and then the third one is yet
Okay.
changed up again. It's all epistolary,
Hmm.
but I things change as you go along. And then there are two short stories in other collections. There's
Okay.
an Airship 27 collection called Occult Detectives that has
Hmm.
four stories in it. One of them is Sergeant Janus. And then there's the Legends of New Pulp Fiction. Oh, actually, there's three short stories. I'm sorry. That one has one, and then a book called Hard Boiled Horror
Ooh.
has a Sergeant Janus story in it too. I'm trying to write the fourth one, and unfortunately, I'm my inspiration is not
Mm.
muse is not totally there.
Yes. I
But
understand
I
how
did. I
that
have
goes.
I have started it. I hope I can get back to it at some point soon.
So let's talk a little bit about collections and anthologies because Flinch Books, which you work with John Bruning on, co-conspirator that we've had on the show.
Yeah.
Uh, I've read Restless so far. This is the
Okay.
one
Good.
again in the horror genre. Really, like I did not know how much I love mummy stories until I was reading this one.
I love that. Yeah. Um, we wanted to do a horror anthology, and I said right at the beginning, John, I am not doing vampires. I am not doing werewolves. Pardon
You
the
didn't want
pun.
to get into the twilight of it all?
Pardon the pun. They're done to death. you know, I said, no way. I cannot think of anything that we could
Mhm.
possibly bring to that. And yeah, although that might be popular if people who, have to buy a vampire anthology, anyone that they see. I said, again, it's like, that's what we do. We do something different, you know.
Mhm.
And I said, all right, let me float this boat. I said, mummies. That's what we don't have enough of in the world is
I
mummy
agree.
anthologies. It's like, yeah, you got and zombies. I said we are not
Mhm.
doing zombies. We're not doing zombies, we're not doing werewolves, we're not doing vampire. We're not even going to combine all those three in one. I said, "Come on, what hasn't been done? Mummies." And he's like, "Okay, yeah, we can do that." To the point where he actually contributed a story to that collection.
I
So we're very proud of that because we said, Mummies is going to be the next big thing,
mhm.
and we're still waiting. I'm still looking at my watch, and I'm still waiting for Mummies to become the next big thing.
I think the thing that's cool about mummies is that you have all of this back lore that works with
Yeah,
because a and something that the book proves is mummies are everywhere. In every
yeah.
culture, there's a kind of mummy,
It's global. It
it's
is
global,
literally a global thing.
which means you have the opportunity to set it in a lot of different locations, different things, but inherently that idea of unearthing something
Hmm.
gives you this whole different angle that
Yeah,
you don't get with a lot of other horror. Also, it's the idea of we are releasing something that
Yeah.
isn't like releasing a vampire, releasing a mummy. That's The Walking Undead. I'm just a big fan of the Brendan Fraser mummy movies. So even the third one. So I'll take more mummy goodness.
We will have to diverge on that point. For
Oh,
me, it's Universal. The
oh,
the original
the
Boris
original black
Karloff,
and white ones. Yeah.
and then the Tom Tyler first Karis movie, and then the three
Ooh.
other Lon Chaney
Mhm.
Karis movies.
I
I
have not
even
seen the OGs, to be completely candid. I
Oh,
have only
okay.
seen the only OG Universal monster movie I've seen is the Bela Lugosi Dracula.
Okay. All right. Well, you have to drop everything and watch
Okay.
those movies. Now, have you seen the Hammer? Have you seen Hammer movies?
I've seen one of the Hammer Mummy movies, I think.
I have to hire like a researcher and research the hosts of these shows that I go on, because I don't know if I can
Hey, give me the
just
watch
keep making
list
all these
and
deal
we'll work our
killers.
way through. Best thing
Um,
about doing the show is getting movies and book suggestions.
yes, yes, right, right. Um, I love that whole idea of that we can have mummy stories from across the world.
Hmm.
And that's what we said to everybody. And I said to John, like, we absolutely need to have ancient Egyptian,
Yes.
I mean, people expect that, and
Yes.
there's still things to play with there, but
Hmm.
I'm like, mummies in South America, mummies
Hmm.
in, Tibet, or whatever. And it all came together so well. We're proud of all of our books, and we are very proud of that one. You know, we don't expect to have bestsellers from Flinch,
Hmm.
but at the end of the day, if people say, you know what, that was a really clever, pardon me, take on whatever it is that we're doing, or wow, I mean, an anthology on, fill in the blank,
Hmm.
then that's what we're all about. And I think that Restless really just fits so well in that. And we achieved our goal. We did a horror anthology, and we did it the Flinch way, our way.
Do you have any genres that you still want to venture forth
We
into
we
with this?
just did Western, and that
Yes.
was one that had been especially on John's mind for a while. He really, really wanted to do a Western anthology, and I was okay with that, but I'm not the biggest fan of Westerns unless it's the Lone Ranger, because he's a superhero, right? He's a
Hmm.
superhero cowboy. But John was, he was really hot to do that, and I said, okay, you know what, you're the enthusiasm, you got me, let's do this. And he's like, he said, I want to write a short story for it. And I said, great. And I said, you know what, I said, that's what I need to do, because it's the same idea with
Hmm.
Sergeant Janus. I don't like first person narratives.
Hmm.
In order to get up on that horse, I forced myself to write first person narratives, and now I
Hmm.
really love it. It was the same with westerns. It's like I don't even know if I can write a western, or anything, and I'm not sure I even, I the genre's okay, but I don't know
Hmm.
necessarily if I love it. So I said, you know what? Let's both. So for the very first time, we are both in one of our anthologies with stories, and I had a blast. I just had such a fun time. What haven't we done? We haven't done what I would call pure science fiction yet. We
Hmm.
have Quest for the Space Gods, which has some science fiction-y elements in it. So hang on to that thought, because we're working on something right now that is going to be very pulpy,
Ooh.
potentially science fiction. And again, it's something, we're putting our twist on it. um uh we you had, I think you had Occupied Pulp there. Did you have Occupied Pulp?
I
Oh
don't
no,
have
I thought
Occupied
you
Pulp.
held it up at one
No,
point.
no,
Oh,
I have Restless
oh,
and
okay.
Sergeant Janus.
Oh, okay, sorry, for some reason I thought Occupied Pulp is like thrillers.
Hmm.
That's literally post World War II.
Hmm.
Again, it's like we wanted to do thrillers, but
Mhm.
like World War II stories. There's a
Those
lot of
are
out there.
the best too. Like,
And
that's a great, like, there are certain things, time periods that work well for certain genres.
yeah, yeah.
Adventure, 1920s to almost 40s, 1920 to 1915 to 1939 is like perfect adventure fodder.
Indiana Jones, right?
Indiana Jones. Then the same thing applies to, I think, the thriller and the hard boiled genre is
Yeah.
really 1930. When did World War II start?
Well, for us, 41, but technically 39.
So around 39
Yeah,
to the we're gonna say 19 mid 1960s is like peak thriller war-esque stories
yeah,
where there's feels like the weight of the world is on the shoulders because you can, and this is something Fleming borrowed, you have the weight of we don't want another world war that
yeah,
is constantly something you can play with.
yeah. Also, the idea of that that the villains
Hmm.
were no longer out front, but there was still remnants working
Hmm.
behind the scenes and doing stuff. And that was the idea that we went into it with. I had recently watched for the first time the movie called The Third Man.
Ooh, yes, such a
Yeah,
great movie.
yeah, it really is. I'm an immense fan of the radio drama they did, The Adventures of
Oh,
Harry Lime.
yes,
Orson
thank you,
Welles did.
someone else.
Yeah, it's just a wonderful, wonderful series. But I said, let's do stories set right after the end of the war. And I said, but for people who have already written that sort of thing, there's a lot of they're mostly set in Germany
Mhm,
or to do with Nazis, and it's like, okay, I get that. But I
mhm,
said there were a couple other countries, that the Axis,
mhm.
with so we have stories that are set in Germany, but we also have stories set in Italy, which John wrote, and we have one set in Japan because
Okay.
you don't really get, and it all had to
Mhm,
do with the occupied era,
mhm.
uh, and we couldn't believe it. We got Will Murray to
Oh,
do a
cool.
story for that. He actually then he came to us afterwards. He's like, "Okay, what's the next anthology you guys are doing?" We're just like, Will Murray's asking us, like, what are we going to, and he's in the Western
Oh, that's so great.
anthology too. Yeah, and that one is called Six Gun Legends.
Mhm.
Pardon me.
So, those 2 are probably the next 2 of your guys's I'm gonna order because, very specifically, I love, that genre of the occupied, but also, Trevor Holiday, who's written the Frank Trinity crime series, I know he had a story in the
Yes,
Six Guns, and
yes, he
so,
does. Yes,
he
yeah.
I yeah,
What I
I wanna
love
give it a shot.
what I love about that book is that we have a few very well established Western writers, Jeff Marriott, and Terrence, just to name a couple. And then there's a couple of guys who have never written a Western story. Chris Ryan, that
Mhm.
was his first Western story, and then this guy, his it's so funny. John had written one and it was published right before ours was published in an anthology for somebody else. But I think you're really going to enjoy Occupied. Uh,
Mhm. It sounds very much up my alley, no pun intended.
one of the writers in that is Bill Maynard, and he wrote two official Fu Manchu novels.
Oh,
Uh,
cool.
that were made official by the Romer or Saxe Romer estate.
Mhm.
He has it's a really, really cool concept that he has in there, and that he hopes to spin off and do, more works with that. Will Murray's is so pulpy, so noiry, so thrillery that it's just not funny. And in fact, the image on the cover is taken from his story.
Okay. Well, I'm looking forward to it. You've got me sold, and I hope you have everyone else listening
That's
sold.
one.
Uh, before we're starting to run out of time, but I'd like to ask about Becky's Books, which is an imprint that you have.
Yeah. So Becky Books is named after my late wife. She passed away about 4.5 years ago. And I self-published as Flinch with John Bruning.
Hmm.
but I had done a couple of books that are just me that I self-published that but wouldn't they didn't really fit in with what Flinch does. And about boy, it's almost going to be 2 years ago. I had this brainstorm that I was going to rebrand those books and as Becky Books
Mm.
to honor her. The unofficial slogan is really cool books that she would have loved. So
Oh.
her her spirit kind of
Hmm.
that's my guidance is like would she have liked this or would she have thought that was fun, which she thought that was really cool, and I kind of go from there. So the things that I don't do as Flinch I
Hmm.
do as Becky Books. It's mostly right now nonfiction, but it's
Hmm.
all pop culture nonfiction. We have a fun series going called Memories from Today's Grown Up Kids,
Oh,
where
cool.
we take a topic and we gather a whole bunch of writers, 20 to 25 writers, and then they tell stories from their own childhoods
Mm.
of whatever the theme is. The first one we did was GI Joe.
Hmm.
So it's their recollections of growing up playing with GI Joe. Then we did Dark Shadows. Dark Shadows was Becky's favorite TV show
Oh.
after classic Star Trek.
Uh-huh.
And that one's called Running Home to Shadows because the saying among Dark Shadows fans is that I ran home from school to watch Dark Shadows. That was something she always said. Um, then we have Rising Sun reruns, which is watching all those great Japanese imported TV shows like Ultraman, and then D20 or Die, which is
Hmm.
about classic role playing games. And
Hmm.
then the newest one is about watching classic Star Trek called Galloping Around the Cosmos.
That came out fairly recently, didn't it?
Yeah, not too long ago. And then I have another nonfiction Star Trek book in the works, which should be out in the next, hopefully within the next 2 months.
Hmm.
Uh, but I'm working on a fiction anthology, which is Bigfoot fiction.
Ooh.
So so we have mummy fiction, and this is going to be a collection of 12 Bigfoot prose fiction stories. And again, it's going to run the gamut of
Hmm.
themes and genres. We even have a romance story in there, written by Mary Fan, which I cannot wait to unleash on the world. She thinks that maybe she's going to kickstart a whole new genre of cryptid romance stories. It's really fun. There's some thriller ones, some sort of science fiction ones that have a little lighter tone, but
Hmm.
they're all with Bigfoot as the central theme.
Already am doing the headcanon that it is the same Bigfoot in every one of these stories.
That's a great idea. Maybe I'll suggest that when I write the introduction to it. But that again, that should be out in the next couple of months too. Both the new Star Trek one and
Mhm,
that one, hopefully first quarter, this year.
mhm. So one of the last questions I always like to ask the writers I have on the show, do
Yeah.
you have a writing routine? And if so, what does it look like?
I wish I had a writing routine. No, my writing habits are just horrible. They're really really bad, and sometimes I go long periods of time without writing fiction, and it really gets me down. And then something kicks in, and I think it's basically I get so frustrated with
Mm,
myself, and I say you have so many ideas, and they're never going to get out into the world until you write them.
mhm,
Or something will come along that is maybe like one of the licensed projects that I do.
mhm.
And that forces me to do it because now I'm writing for somebody else
Yes.
and with a strict deadline and
Mhm,
I'm paid, So I basically sit around. My routine is to sit around and hope that something like that will fall into my lap and force me to start writing again. The Flinch books projects,
mhm.
if I'm going to be one of the writers in that's going to force me to
I
do
mean,
it.
to your credit, you're one of the most prolific authors I've had on the show. When we started talking, I was like, oh yeah, if I could take a look at some of this stuff that you've written. The honest truth is you have written a lot, and
You know what
that
I always say
is
at this point?
fantastic.
It's thank you. It's quantity, not quality. Some people say, "Well, I have quality, not quantity," but it's the other way around. It's the other way around with me.
Well,
Um,
I think that that's the longer term. I think that that's more of the longer term approach that works out because as much as like yes, guy that wrote Catch 22, he's always going to have I wrote Catch 22.
yeah, right.
But the difference is it if he had only written one book and it wasn't Catch 22 and only written one book, no one would care. Whereas
I
I love the Alexander Dumas version of it, where write as much as you can pump out, and eventually something might stick.
yeah. That's like the Marvel Comics theory of publishing is throw everything at the wall and see what sticks, you know. Like
Just to make a joke
they'll
about their
literally
current
like,
movie
let's have a
slate.
mini series with every single character we ever have had, ever. And then one or two of those are going to be good and they still haven't done Stingray yet. I don't think he's gotten his own mini series. But uh when I do actually get on the horse and start writing again, I have to write every single day.
Hmm.
Some days it might be 250 words, and then another day it might be 1,500 words. I don't set goals. I used to, and I
Hmm.
amaze myself when I look back at some notes from years ago. And, I get my memories on Facebook and it says, I wrote, 2,600 words today. And it's like, who was that? I don't like, oh my God. But as long as I write every single day,
Hmm.
I know I'm going to eventually get it done.
Yeah.
You're never going to get it done if you just keep, skipping days or you use excuses or whatever. Writing is like pulling teeth to me.
Hmm.
It's that wonderful saying, John and I say it all the time, which is, um, I hate writing, but love having written.
Amen.
That's me. I I don't know if hate is a little bit of a strong word. I
Hmm.
greatly dislike writing,
Hmm.
but boy, do I love the end result.
Hmm.
For me, it's all about the package,
Yep.
and putting a concept out into the world that
Hmm.
maybe will take people by surprise. But I have to remind myself constantly that I have to actually do it, write that thing before it goes out into the world. But that's why I'm a self-publisher, because the
Hmm.
other part of that is I love commissioning covers.
Hmm.
I love working with the formatters and the designers of the logos and the interiors and things like that, and just so proud to have that book, that
Hmm.
finished product in your hands.
Well, that's one of the things we were talking about with John with Flinch books and with the Midnight Guardian books. Like same with Sergeant Janus. This is a very nice book. I'm glad to have it on my shelf. I'll order the other ones to add to my shelf too because I like having the physical book. If you make a good book, it makes me want to buy the book. Which
I'm glad to hear that.
the
That is,
the comparison though is when a lot of the stuff that comes out today and it just has bland looking and it's all
uh,
the same drivel, it's not well formatted. It's like, why would I want to own this? You make me want to get the digital version because I don't care.
there is some truth in judge a book by its cover.
Yes.
And I get it. You can have a beautiful book and have a horribly written story. I
Mhm.
mean,
As many pulp books, unfortunately, like the 50s, 60s schlock sometimes is.
yeah, yeah. Our whole thing at Flinch is that we want to have the best covers.
Hmm.
We're trying and working on all the time to have the best editing. We try to get the best writers, and we try to come up with a concept that surprises people and make them say, I don't think I've really seen that before, and that sounds interesting. If we can hit all those things, we feel really good about it. And by getting the best writers that we can possibly get, we know we're going to get good
Oh,
stories.
yeah.
And I mean it's pretty much that way at Becky Books too. Um, um, I don't work with a whole lot of publishers anymore because I'm really OCD and I wanted to have complete control over covers
Well,
and
and that's
editing
the
and
struggle
things
with
like that.
when you do tie-ins too, I'm sure, is that you don't get as
Yeah.
much play as
Fortunately, I've been really, really fortunate, lucky with the tie-in work that I've
Okay,
done
good.
because the covers have almost to a book have been, really good. My Green Hornet book,
Mm-hmm.
Moonstone just had a really fantastic cover, for that. The Planet of the Apes book looks so good. Oh my God. Moonstone got Mark Maddox to do my Kolchak book. I
Oh,
suggested Mark
cool.
and Joe Gentile over at Moonstone, he's like, yeah, I'll see if I can get him. And he did. He got Mark Maddox. We have a Flinch book that we use Mark Maddox as for the cover artist. So the Sergeant Janus books, those are republished because they used to be at
Mm-hmm.
Airship 27.
Mm-hmm.
I took them back. We
Mm-hmm.
we expanded and re-edited them and put new covers on them. Jeff Hayes does the Plasma Fire Graphics does the covers for those. We love working with artists, and we feel that we have this little stable of artists
Mm-hmm.
that we can turn to and just get incredibly, good work from, and that will really stand out. We have an amazing formatter that we use
Mm-hmm.
both at Flinch Books and at Becky Books, who just does gorgeous work of the interior design.
Mm-hmm. Uh, Jim, this has been an absolute pleasure. We could talk
It's
for
been really
hours
fun. Thank you.
longer. I still have questions saved, which
I'll come
means
back.
you're
I'll
gonna
just come
come
back.
back.
Okay.
You're definitely a recurring
I know,
guest.
right? You probably had other questions and me going off on my million tangents.
It was a blast.
But you encourage them.
I did encourage it. So one of the last things I want to ask, first and foremost, is where can people go to learn more about you and your work?
I'm
Because
so proud to say that Flinch Books now has a brand new official website, flinchbooks.com. It's
awesome.
amazing. I never imagined that we would have such a nice website.
It really
You can
does
see
look great.
Thank you. You can see all of our books there. There's links to go to Amazon to order them. There's a way to contact us. There's a little bit about us and what we do. As far as I'm old school. I'm on Facebook. Facebook. I'm a writer today because of Facebook. Almost
Mhm.
all of my connections that I have made are because of Facebook. You can go to the Jim Beard and Becky Books page
Okay.
to see all of my non-Flinch stuff that
Mhm.
comes out. And then Flinch Books has a Facebook page also. Of course, just go to Amazon, put my
Mhm.
name in under books, and you'll see everything except my two Moonstone books.
Mhm.
Those would be at moonstonebooks.com, and that's the Green Hornet novel and the Kolchak novel. And I have a new Green Hornet short story coming out, hopefully within the
Ooh,
next few months. It should be solicited pretty soon in Diamond Previews.
okay.
It'll be one of the. Are you familiar with Moonstone? How they
No.
they they put out like short stories, and they're called double shots and triple
Oh,
threats. John just had a Green Hornet story in a double.
yeah.
So my new Green Hornet short story will be in the new double shot, I believe, and I'm not sure what the other character will be in that. And then you can also find me on the site formerly known as Twitter, which is now known as X. And then I'm at writer Jim Beard. And talk to me. Come and play forever and ever and ever.
And we will link all of that in the show notes. Jim, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thanks. It was a lot of fun. I appreciate it.
Awesome. Oh, when your mouse stops working.
Uh-oh.